Hello and welcome to my Nagging Thoughts. Today I want to discuss the two different types of nagging that are in the Bible. The first is the traditionally understood bad type of nagging, and it is the easily provoked variety, which can be found in Proverbs chapter 21, verses 9 and verses 19, as well as Proverbs chapter 25, verse 24. But there's an entirely different type of nagging, and it is the dripping variety, which can be found in Proverbs chapter 19, verse 13, as well as Proverbs chapter 27, verses 15 and 16. So let me share the radical difference between the two. The former is the traditionally understood type of nagging, and it is self-righteous in nature and condescending in nature, so it is bad. However, because our Lord Jesus testified in John chapter 5, verse 39, that the Bible is first and foremost a book about Him, we must, as believers, ask ourselves how a verse about a nagging wife complies with that truth. Very simply, God uses marriage as an illustration or an allegory to help us understand the type of intimate and binding relationship that He has with His people. And because He is our perfect, holy, creator God, we have absolutely no right to demand that He answer to us or that He explain to us sinners why He doesn't do things the way that we think that they should be done. And when we do that, we push Him away with this behavior. And that is corroborated. These principles that I'm describing, that has been corroborated in Isaiah chapter 55, verse 9, Job chapter 40, verse 8, as well as James chapter 4, verse 8, among other places in the Bible. Now, since the easily provoked nagging wife is first and foremost a spiritual principle that is ultimately calling us into intimacy by trusting our Lord Jesus, the notion of an easily provoked person pushing a spouse away is something that applies to everyone and not just women or wives or believing women in marriage. However, it is extremely important to mention that pushing someone away by getting easily offended does not cause God to break His covenant with us, nor does it ever cause Him to sin against us. So this type of negative nagging verse should absolutely never be used as a weapon against a spouse to justify the other spouse's sinful behavior, either inside or outside of the marriage. Now, with that said, let me move on to the dripping variety of nagging, which is completely different in nature. While the traditional interpretation is that the descriptor of dripping is used to indicate that there's some form of water torture that is strategically designed to drive its victim insane, it's simply not possible that these verses are referring to that type of concept. And that's because the idea of dripping water torture not only did not originate in ancient Israel, but the first documented case of it that I could find did not occur until the 15th century after Christ, by a lawyer named, and I apologize, I'm going to probably butcher his name, but just so that you may fact check me on this, the lawyer's name is Hippolytus de Marcellus. Like I said, I probably butchered it, but you can fact check me on that. Now, keep in mind that Solomon, who wrote the majority of Proverbs, lived in the 10th century before Christ. So there's absolutely no way that Solomon could have possibly have been referring to some form of water torture when he penned these verses. Furthermore, Solomon actually articulated how he thought drips worked when he authored Ecclesiastes. And in chapter 10, verse 18, he wrote these words. He said, "Because of laziness, the roof caves in, and because of idle hands, the house leaks." So if you cross-reference those words of Solomon with his words that are found in Proverbs 27:15, you're going to see that the dripping that's coming from the wife in this verse is the result of a rainstorm outside. So it's very reasonable to conclude that this drip is actually a gentle and a persistent alert to the head of the house that a critical problem with the fundamental integrity of the home has happened. And if such a serious issue is left neglected and it remains ignored, then as Ecclesiastes predicted, the roof will fail. And that being a metaphor for marriage, that means that the marriage will collapse. So that a wife that was neglected and a husband that was able to dominate her into hiding leaks in the fundamental integrity of the marriage by shaming her into silence, that ability, all those abilities to neglect and dominate, they will be gone with the wind, just like your marriage. And your ability to dominate her into assuming responsibility for the problem without you dealing with the maintenance of your own house will be like you using your strongest and most dominant hand to grab spilled oil. These principles are described in the following verse in Proverbs 27:16, and they are corroborated. All of these concepts that I'm describing for the dripping wife, they are corroborated by calls to be doers of the word, which has been illustrated with the and contrasted with the man that built his house on the rock versus the man who built his house on the sand in Matthew chapter 7 verses 24 through 27, as well as in the parable of the persistent widow, which is found in Luke chapter 18, verses 1 through 8. And Jesus concludes that parable with a direct challenge to believers. And he asks us, this woman persistently, gently, and relentlessly pursued justice with a wicked judge. And in the end, she got it. And Jesus leaves us with the challenge and the question. When he comes back, will he find any faith on earth? So Jesus expects us to continue to be patient and persistent and gentle and relentless when it comes to seeking justice. And these are the two radical differences between the easily provoked and the dripping type of nagging. The dripping type is a justice persistent and patient type of nagging, and the easily provoked is a hothead, self-serving type of nagging that is condescending and trying to dominate and crush the other person. So I hope that's helpful to you, and I appreciate your time very much. Please leave your comments, questions, challenges in the space below, and I hope you have a great week. Thank you so much for your time. God bless.